So welcome everybody. I'm going to try and talk really fast so we can recover some time. Thank you for the shout out, Jared. So I'm Giorgio Ciotti. I'm a senior DevRel engineer at the Algorand Foundation. And today I'm talking about random number generation. So we're going to see like the journey through from raw entropy to a verifiable seed that we can use for random number generation. We're going to see like what we actually use, what's the algorithm that we use for random number generation, and like some possible applications once you have a sequence of random integers. So the motivations for randomness on a chain lotteries, like we are interested in programs that can have unpredictable outputs. We are also interested in verifiable randomness, so it's also like a good goal to have that we can just give a sequence of random integers to some other party, untrusted party, and be able to prove to them with an on-chain proof that this sequence was generated fairly and safely. Games. Also games. This is the example of a card game. You can imagine how we could use randomness to shuffle a deck of cards, but also loot boxes. So you open a box and you get like different prizes. So the question is, how can we like bring randomness on the blockchain, which is a completely public environment? We want to take a look at how randomness is generated and used today. So we start with essentially in a centralized environment, we have a boundary where we can keep a seed secret. And in this case, like this is a wall of lava lamps. And what some companies do is that they sample like the randomness generated by these lava lamps, and they use it to seed their programs, their random programs, and they try to keep this seed secret because like a random number generator is a deterministic algorithm. So if you know the code of the algorithm and you know the seed, so it will be the initial state, then you know the entire sequence. So this is an example of how random numbers are generated using Python. So we import NumPy, we initialize a random number generator with an arbitrary seed that we keep a secret, and then we just ask for numbers, and we don't have to say how many we're going to ask. This is just available on top. We can just ask how many numbers we want, and if the algorithm is safe, there's no way to trace back the seed starting from, if I'm only seeing the sequence of numbers, there's no way to get back to the seed if the algorithm is safe. So this is very important in a centralized setup. So yeah, we mentioned that if you know the seed and what program algorithm I'm using, you have complete predictability, and predictable system can be tricked. So for example, if someone is selling a stack of lottery tickets and I know which seed I used to generate these tickets, I can just show up at the right time and buy the winning ticket. So predictable systems can be gamed, can be tricked. So in a decentralized environment, we want to completely reverse the orders of the action. So going a little bit back. So at this point, we start with the seed, we keep it secret, and then we use it in a program. In a decentralized environment, we want to do the opposite. We want to start with the program, and we want to fix the application in place on the blockchain such that it is public and immutable. So we still don't know the seed yet because we only published the program on the chain, and the program is set up so program is exactly this on a smart contract, and it will accept any seed which we don't know yet. And then the order is reversed. We find a way to get a safe seed on the chain and activate the program that we already committed to. So the order is reversed. And in this way, like I can convince anyone that I published a program and I couldn't possibly know the output because the seed was revealed publicly at a later time. So let's take a look at a very natural approach for how we would get a seed publicly. If we have a chain of blocks, we start with the first block. And the first thing that we do is that we publish an app that commits to use whatever seed we get at block number 2. And as a source of chaos, or entropy, in a natural approach is to use the hash of the block number 2. So the hash in general will be the digest of the information within the block. And because like the network is public and permissionless, there's no one that can really anticipate all the transactions that will make it into the second block. So by taking the hash of the second block, we expect the digest of that block to be essentially unpredictable. After we've done this, we call the app that we fixed in place at block number 1, and at block number 3, we read the hash of the block number 2. So we didn't know what the hash was going to be at block number 2. The program is fixed up before that. So on block 3, we take the program and the seed, and we execute them together. What's wrong with this? So in that picture, we can see how the protocol committees have visibility and control over the hash of the second seed, because the committees decide which transaction make it into the block, and they decide the order. So they have some control over what the hash is going to be. And since it is predictable to the committee, they can decide to do some Eclipse attacks where they obscure transactions. And so essentially they can still trick the system a little bit because they have visibility and control over how the second block that we committed to will be generated. How are we solving for this? We take the idea that we already saw. So we publish an application on block number 1, and we fix it in place such that it cannot change. And we commit to use some information of the second block in the sequence, only that this time we take the hash of the second block and we run it through an off-chain service. So this off-chain service is manipulating the digest and the hash of the second block, and it's publishing the result on block number 3. So, but like we cannot simply trust whatever the service says, that it is just random, because otherwise they could also like publish any information that would benefit them. We want to only trust an off-chain service that runs a VRF, so a verifiable random function, on the hash of the second block. And this verifiable random function is a zero-knowledge proof. So the service owns a secret component of this zero-knowledge proof, and it uses it to compute the value of that function. And once this service publishes the output of that function on block 3, there is a smart contract, which is the randomness beacon published public on the Algorand network, that verifies that the certificate and the output match against the public key of the off-chain service. So in this way, we have a different situation, because now the committees are not incentivized anymore to influence how block 2 is being produced. So they have no incentive to try and reorganize transactions or omit information on the block, because they essentially don't own the secret to the VRF. So they don't own the secret that is owned by the off-chain service. So this means that it can be verified that it was not a fraudulent computation of the chain, but still no one essentially would know how to modify block 2 to change the hash of the block and influence in their desired way the output of the VRF.
Can I ask a quick question? So you can still influence block number 2, its hash, the structuring of the transaction.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't know what's actually going on in the transfer function of that cloud of the VRF. Is that? Because if you know what the transfer function looks like, then you could still include malicious content in the hash of block number 2 and influence the randomness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a good question. So the question is, if I understand correctly, is that if block 3 only sees the output of the VRF, like
I mean,
it.
more like is the algorithm and the VRF not known or somehow hidden, or in that sense?
The algorithm. So the VRF depends on the secret that the cloud service owns, if that makes sense. So each secret would lead to a different output. So this function is essentially parameterized by the secret key that is owned by the service. And the zero knowledge proof then proves that the output matches like a correct computation against the public key corresponding to the secret key. So the input to the VRF is the hash of block 2, which is known. And block 3 can read that from the chain itself, because like the hashes of the last 1,000 blocks or so are known, like on the chain. So this is public information, and this is not public information because the secret component is secret, but it can be verified with on chain with because it's a zero knowledge.
Yet it's actually on the node. And the node is proposing the block
Um,
on any node, or is this a cloud service? No, it's not. It should be on the node.
this is just a service. Like I use the image of a cloud to symbolify that this is an off-the-chain service, but it's not a node. It's running a VRF, but it's using it as a tool. It's not running the consensus protocol.
Right.
So it's just a cryptographic tool.
And the public key is known on the blockchain.
Right. Yes.
But not, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So when the block 3 accepts this certificate and this output, it is checking it against a known public key. That's exactly right. And so we're now at the point where we have a seed on chain that essentially no one could forge. And we read this on block 4 when we actually call the application that we committed on block 1. We call and read the VRF output saved on the chain. Perfect, we have a secure seed. Now we would like to use this seed as an initial state to generate a sequence of random integers. And we want to stick with known and battle-tested algorithms to generate random integers, because we want essentially many properties, but essentially we want every number possible to be generated by this algorithm. So we don't want any number that can never appear in the sequence, because that would be unbiased, would create a bias in the long term. And also every number that appears in the sequence should appear roughly the same number of times. So we don't want an uneven distribution. We want in the long term an uneven distribution of random integers, because that also avoids bias in the long term. To solve these problems, I wrote a library which is called libpcg-avm. And if we recall the image that we saw previously about how we run randomness with Python and NumPy, this is very similar. Like this is a contract method. We initialize the random number generator with an initial state. Right now this is an arbitrary seed, but what you would do is you would read the seed from the randomness beacon. And then we ask it for essentially bounded integers and of arbitrary length. So we're not constrained by the size of the VRF. We can ask this library how many random integers we want. We are only constrained by the actual memory that's in a smart contract and in the environment of execution of a smart contract. Yep.
Is this uniform distribution?
Yes. Yeah, in the long term. Like this has a period of 2 to the 64. Like so, before you start repeating your sequence, you would have to ask this generator for 2 to the 64 numbers, which is a huge number. But if you would be able to generate the whole sequence, you would see the numbers generated the same exact amount of times.
So a constant PDF.
Huh?
A constant probability.
Yeah, yeah. We want to avoid to talk about probability because this is deterministic. Like so, strictly speaking, like it's uniform. We don't. If we talk about probability, we're talking about an ideal generator, and this is like practical pseudo-random number generator. Like if we talk about probability, it's difficult to define it. But yeah, so this is the library that I wrote to solve this problem. And I implemented on-chain for the AVM a family of random number generation algorithms that are called PCG, which stands for permuted congruential generator. And there are lots of parameters that go into this family of algorithms. You can vary the size of your inputs. You can vary the size of your numbers in the output. So you can have like larger numbers or like uint 8, uint 64, 256 numbers. We now have a sequence of random integers. I'm just going to speed through this, but essentially, once you have a fair sequence of random numbers, you can use algorithms like Fisher-Yates shuffle to create a permutation, so a rearrangement of an initial data set. And what this means is that if you imagine that the input data set is like the list of your participants in a lottery, you can create a rearrangement of those participants and you can select like the first K winners. And so you would need to use a sequence of random integers to randomize this algorithm and make sure that it creates fair rearrangements. It creates rearrangement all with the same frequency. So yeah, this is like a code example because I also implemented like this permutation generator on this permutation shuffling algorithm on chain. This is a snippet of code from that. The important thing from this is that we are using the PCG 128. So it's one of the family of these algorithms, and the range in which we generate this number varies based on the item that we are seeing in the for loop. So like the idea what I would like to see developed based on this library is that like I'm interested in the concept of committed strategy. So committing a program that can react to any seed that you give it. So we've seen the example of lottery and shuffling, but you can imagine how you can also like make this more complex. Verifiable randomness, I mentioned this. I could create a sequence of random integers starting from a seed that I committed, starting with a program that I committed way earlier than when the seed appeared on chain. So when I actually go and create this sequence, this is totally random, and I can prove it to anyone that I didn't know ahead of time. Games, I also mentioned this. Random loot and based on chance, I think, would be really good applications for this library. Links for the library if anyone's interested. This is the article that I read. Like the PCG paper is a paper describing this family of algorithms. And it's really, really interesting. It's almost the only thing that I read. It's so comprehensive and so well written. I encourage everyone to read the paper. And Fisher-Yates shuffle, you can also just Google this because it just links you to the Wikipedia page. Thank you very much for listening.